Hi friend, recently some friends visited me and asked what mistakes I would fix or what things I would change in my apartment. I started thinking about it, what do I actually consider to be mistakes or flaws that I would change in my place? So today, I've made this video just for you, where I'll tell you what I would change in my 3 different apartments. It was located in a city where I didn't live. I renovated it in 2019, and probably the first major mistake was starting the renovation at all. Why? At that time, I had already moved from one city to another, and I had my own apartment which was sitting there collecting dust. I thought, well, I'm a designer, I should renovate my place. So I went ahead and did it, but honestly, I didn't live in that apartment for long. It turned out my friends ended up living there more than I did. So the first thing, if you don't live in the city and you just have an apartment there, it's probably not the best idea to start renovating it. That said, I did end up selling it later and made a good profit because the renovation was really cool and designer level. Next point. When I bought the toilet, it already came with a flush button. The button was round, I didn't really like it, but I decided not to bother replacing it. Maybe I could have found a way to replace it. But there weren't many compatible buttons available on the market for that toilet. You might call it perfectionism, but this was something that really bothered me. Next point. When I was working on this apartment, I had a washer-dryer combo 2-in-1, so I didn't think about where a separate dryer would go. But later it turned out that the combo machine doesn't fully dry clothes, and you can't properly dry all clothes in it because some fabrics shrink in the dryer. So friends, if you're planning your interior, definitely think about where your dryer will go. In my latest apartment, I fixed this and created a special niche by the window. I put a vertical dryer in that niche. And here's a little life hack for you. Your dryer doesn't have to be the standard one with the big foldable wings. There are small compact dryers that used to be sold at IKEA. You can get vertical dryers or even install a foldable drying rack in your bathroom. In another apartment, I had a special dryer mounted above the washing machine, which was hidden inside a closet. It was for a small number of clothes because you don't always need to wash a lot, and I would hang things there. But honestly, I made another mistake here. I didn't plan for ventilation in that closet. And when clothes dry there, you really need ventilation to pull out the moisture. Otherwise, the clothes start to smell a bit musty. I mean a forced ventilation system, like the one you install in a regular bathroom. So, friends, if you're placing a dryer inside a cabinet or putting in a washing machine, install forced ventilation and leave a small gap at the bottom for air circulation. And by the way, if you have a washing machine in the cabinet, make sure the cabinet is slightly deeper than the washing machine, so you can leave the door slightly open to avoid stagnant air. Next point, a shelf in the bathroom in a visible spot. You know, when you enter a minimalist, bright interior and then you see some clutter right when you walk in. I always disliked that. But in my first apartment, I didn't consider this. Later on, I realized you could hide things like this by creating special niches or placing shelves on, for example, the wall behind the bathroom door, so it's not visible when you walk in. So in my bathroom, when you walked in, your eyes immediately went to the shelf full of bottles. Of course, I bought nice bottles, but still, it kind of annoyed me. But in my other apartments, if you've seen my home tours, I fixed that. And in my latest apartment, I have a whole system of hidden shelves. If you're interested, you can check out a detailed tour of my apartment. Follow the link in the description. This is my latest apartment, my 3rd one. The next thing I didn't think about in my first apartment was the bed. It was built on a platform, and I ordered a custom-sized mattress to fit exactly in the space where the bed was located. It was, if I'm not mistaken, 5 feet and 1 inch wide. And what problem did I run into? You know, it's very convenient to have fitted sheets with elastic, right? Unfortunately, in regular stores, fitted sheets are made for 5 feet 3 inches mattresses. But for my 5 feet 1 inch mattress, they were too big, so the sheet didn't fit well, and I had to keep adjusting it. So friends, never buy custom-sized mattresses. Always get standard ones. Even if you have to adjust your bed by a couple of inches, it's much better. Alright, I sold that apartment and now I have the money to move. I bought myself a gorgeous 377 square feet studio. It had a stunning view, and the renovation started during the pandemic. I remember by that time I was already an experienced designer, and I thought, why don't I save some money on the builders? Well, how would I save? I could control them properly, make sure they fix everything right, and I'd keep an eye on them. So yeah, I'd save. So I hired some cheap builders, not the ones we use for our projects, but really low budget ones. In the end, I fired them because they had to redo so many things. I got so tired of coming in and pointing out what they did wrong. And the worst part is, when they mess up, they ruin the materials. I had to buy new materials over and over again. And of course, often not at their expense because these cheap builders didn't have much money. By the way, in the first apartment, I also hired my own builders who work on our projects. There were almost no problems there either, and I didn't even live in that city. Yet, they did the renovation very well. Another issue with bad builders is that after you've struggled with them, fired them, and replaced them, you end up spending more money than you planned. In the end, as they say, a penny saved is a penny spent, because any flaws in the renovation will always catch your eye. For example, I had one crooked wall that I looked at every day and thought, oh man. Friends, all these mistakes I've talked about and will talk about are compiled into a knowledge base in our studio, not just from my 3 personal projects, but from all the projects my studio has done. We pass this knowledge base to our designers, creating educational materials so that they learn and avoid making decisions that didn't turn out great for some reason. So, if you want to benefit from this knowledge base, you can order a project from our studio. This is our accumulated experience and it will help you avoid many mistakes. So if you're planning to design a project soon, click the link in the description or scan the QR code, contact our studio and order your design project from us. We work in Bali, the USA, Germany, Russia, UAE and other countries. Never trust floor installation to people who don't specialize in it. Regular workers shouldn't handle this. It's better to hire specialists who know how to properly install parquet. I made this mistake. My builder did the flooring and he couldn't make a proper neat connection between the parquet and the wall to place a proper cork compensator there. So all these side joints looked terrible and we had to fill them, carefully matching the color with a special liquid cork compensator. In areas with a lot of unevenness, I actually covered them with a couch, so it wasn't too noticeable. By the way, in my first apartment, the parquet was laid by specialists and the floor was amazing. I really loved that project. Friends, by the way, in a few weeks, we'll release a video on our channel about the decisions I've made in my 3 apartments that I loved and still love, the ones I'm happy with and would recommend to everyone. I think they were the right choices. So if you're interested, feel free to subscribe to our channel and in a few weeks, that video will be out. The next mistake I made in this apartment, so I thought, we've done a lot of renovations and we have paint codes. I picked the most standard paint code, one we didn't use often, and painted the walls with it. I come back, and the walls aren't white like I planned, they're yellow. I got really upset about it, and in the end, I had to buy more paint and repaint. How should it have been done right, and how I now do it in every renovation and on every project. For paint swatches, you take small pieces of drywall, about 20 inches by 20 inches, prep them, and paint them with, say, 3 shades of white, each of these surfaces, and in the end, you have different colors to compare. You place them against each wall and see how they look in that room during the day when natural light comes through the window, and in the evening, when you turn on a yellow light, see how it all looks then. Friends, in this video, I'm all about honesty, and I've shared some of my mistakes with you, and I'll share a few more interesting ones. But friends, you can also be honest with me and write in the comments about your mistakes and what you would actually redo in the home where you did renovations. The next mistake I ran into was when I was doing the kitchen in this apartment. Instead of a quartz agglomerate countertop, I had a regular countertop made of the same particle board LDS as the cabinet fronts. Well, it was supposed to be special, with some kind of great characteristics. They told me at the store that yes, it would hold up, everything would be fine, and nothing would absorb into it. No, it did absorb, and as a result, it left stains. Sure, it looked monolithic, matching the cabinet fronts in the same color, but yes, it was highly absorbent. So friends, if you're making a kitchen, make sure to get a good countertop. The next mistake I quickly corrected was not coating the concrete with a special solution. In my apartment, I left the concrete walls exposed because I liked the raw texture of the concrete. It kind of reflected my personality, so I wanted to keep it. But concrete has one downside. The downside is that it creates dust, meaning your apartment will always have dust. So, to preserve that texture, you need to coat the concrete with a special solution, and then your concrete won't create dust. The next thing that really bothered me was the cheap hardware on the front door. In this apartment, I didn't bother too much. I just bought the simplest black hardware so it would blend with the door. But because it was cheap, it quickly started to become loose. And so every time I opened or closed the door, it reminded me of this mistake. So for areas you use a lot, like the front door, it's not worth saving money. The next thing I would change in that apartment is that I installed too much lighting in the bathroom. I barely ever used the overhead light because I had perimeter lighting. If I wanted to create an atmosphere, I would use the perimeter lighting. And if I needed light on my face, I had lights mounted on the cabinet with the mirror. Now let's move to my third apartment, which I did recently, and there I made the opposite mistake. Since I installed a lot of lighting in the previous apartment, in my new one, I decided to only use ambient lights in the bathroom. As a result, there wasn't enough light, so I had to install an additional ceiling light. My ceiling was black, and I didn't want to ruin the look, so I installed a black-mounted light that can pivot and point at my face in front of the mirror. The next issue also has to do with lighting. I had LED strips from a well-known smart home brand that I won't mention. But since it's a budget system, the strip wasn't very bright. So in my future apartments or homes, I'll likely use more powerful LED strips. There are also various issues with the switches from this brand because it's not a fully integrated smart home system, it works on radio signals. I have panels that you press and they send a signal to a relay switch. The relay then turns the light on or off. The advantage of this system is that you can place outlets wherever you want using the existing wiring. The downside is that sometimes the system doesn't work correctly. The biggest downside is that it runs on batteries and you have to replace them every 6 months, which can be quite a hassle. So friends, if you want a full smart home system, it's better to use a wired setup or more modern switches and panels from simpler smart home systems. When I did my first 2 apartments, there weren't many options, just 2 brands. But now there are plenty, and they're of much better quality. The next problem related to electronics, which is actually very easy to fix, is having a weak projector. Nowadays, there are some good projectors, and with mine, I can watch something on the wall during the day. But if the sun is shining brightly, the projector doesn't perform well. So I would probably change all the projectors, and that's likely what I'll do for myself. So friends, if you're getting a projector, do your research, find out which ones are powerful and can work in daylight. Because such projectors exist and we use them in our projects, there are even short-throw projectors. We installed projectors in one apartment in a skyscraper during a renovation. We discovered a really cool projector that worked just like a TV. These kinds of projectors exist, so take advantage of them. And you know, probably the biggest mistake in my apartment is that it's completely white. What problem did I face? If, of course, I live in this apartment, I'm very careful, but now I've decided to rent it out. And one thing is holding me back. I'm afraid that the apartment is so white that I won't be able to rent it out because it'll get trashed. That's the main reason. So, friends, at first you may have one plan, but then those plans can change. In the future, I'll probably design my home in a way that I won't mind renting it out, so the materials used won't get damaged. Or if they do get damaged, they can be easily replaced. The next mistake is how the bedroom door opens. When you enter, the door opens directly into another door. We didn't notice this in the design phase. Now it's not very convenient, especially because there's a sliding drawer inside that can only be opened when the door is fully open. Occasionally, these doors bump into each other, which is quite inconvenient. What's the right way to fix this? Well, you could either install an accordion-style sliding door that you open and it moves to the other side. Then the wardrobe becomes fully accessible and doesn't interfere with the other door. Or you could install a door that slides into the wall, so when you open it, the doors slide in and the space is fully accessible. The next point is a smudgy surface that looks like metal. My upper cabinets are metallized, and I tested this material because it had just come out at the time and not many people were using it. We used it with a paint finish, so it's not real metal. It just looks like metal. It's metallic paint. But it turned out that it's still a smudgy material, and fingerprints are left on it. In other projects, when we used metal-like facades, we found another material that doesn't show fingerprints. How do we deal with this? Well, first of all, I have a recessed handle in the upper cabinets for opening them. I added this so we wouldn't touch the upper facades with dirty hands, which is very convenient for opening. As for the horizontal surfaces where things are placed, we covered them with special glass. It looks like the surface, but there's a thin layer of glass, and nothing gets scratched or smudged.